So, talking about friction, we have 1K Bell with Gravity DAO coming up next, which is all about conflict resolution. And we've talked a lot about different organizations and the ability that they have to support members. We hinted a little bit about problems that can arise in DAOs and how people deal with problems, but really, when it comes down to it, sometimes there comes a mediator that needs to step in and needs to facilitate the change in an organization. So I'm really excited about Juan coming up here to tell us about some of the resolution that happens. I believe previously they had Graviton. So Graviton training and Graviton stewards were members that could help facilitate conflict resolution. Uh, how's it going, Juan? Good to see you today.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Great to be here.
So I was just telling people a little bit about the Gravitas program and conflict resolution. Do you think you could introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about Gravity DAO and how you're helping to resolve conflict these days?
Yeah, of course. Well, my name is Juan Carlos Bell. I am from Colombia and I did my university studies in political science, and then I made a master's degree in conflict management. And what I have found out is that conflict is something that we experience every day in multiple scales, and that we can work and improve our capacity to deal with conflict, and that meaning conflict with yourself or conflict with others. So I think that is a very important skill for people participating in DAOs and in Web3 projects where things are uh, changing a lot, where you are working with a lot of people, and that coordination always creates some frictions when we are also living very stressful times. So I think that having conflict management should be a basic infrastructure for communities. And what I do professionally is that when there are issues in the community, I try to professionally facilitate the solving of those issues. But at the same time, we train people to do the same so that it's not something centralized like um, I am always going to be the mediator, but like we all can act as a positive third party in a dispute. And I want to raise competence and awareness about this so that there is more people willing to facilitate and to solve conflict in a transformational way in this community. Thinking in the long term that this will help projects to achieve their goals and also build a more non less violent culture. Should I start my presentation?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. My presentation today, I am going to present what is called the Graviton Guide. I asked the people in the stage um, to make accessible uh, the link to these slides to everyone, because for me this is an open source tool that I want to give out to to the people in the Web3 space, and it's a step-by-step guide for mediation in DAOs. So basically, this document is that if you don't have any idea on how to mediate a conflict between two people, you can read this document and at least have some guidance on what are the first things you should do, how does the process go, and yeah, I am going to explain a little bit these slides, but the idea is that I want this to be a tool for everyone to have access to refer, and yeah, to iterate on. So first, we start explaining what are the ethical standards and requirements for gravitons. That is what the way we call mediators, and is that the first thing is that people participating in gravity and its cases should participate without coercion, because this is all a voluntary process. That the graviton has agency to lead the conflict management process and facilitate communication, but cannot influence on the potential agreement or the specific outcomes of the dispute. Also, that gravitons should be able to recognize when they have conflict of interest, or when other graviton points that there may be a conflict of interest. We can search for other facilitator in a mediation. Also, there should be an assumption of competence and for the mediator in the subject of the dispute, but also we can call subject matter experts if needed for an advice process. Also, there should be confidentiality involved in all the process, impartiality and neutrality from the mediator. Also, the mediator assumes a professional responsibility while doing uh, this role of mediating, and it's not like something that we can take light. It's a professional responsibility, and also that we encourage rotation. That's why we always are um, training new people to become competent in this, because we don't want to be like the same group always um, being the mediators, and somehow that would centralize this, and we want to try to be a decentralized project. So we are doing the Graviton trainings. They are on Tuesdays. You are all invited. Next Tuesday, I will be leading the session. We have been we have had 4 sessions of a 10-session course at this point, but you can join. Next session will be mine. And once you do the training, you can gain experience and contribute within our DAO and our group, and then you can take the third step of becoming an active graviton and manage conflict in your community or in other communities. So it's not like, okay, you get the training and then you can become an active graviton first. The training is like an entry door, but we continue in the second stage with continued learning opportunities, so that people, when they are taking cases, they feel that they have the competence to do it. So the expectations are that Graviton should be able to make an effort to be present and accessible for the community, separate the people from problems, self-determinate from all parties, promote empathy between conflicting parties, adapt their mindset for tolerance, propose alternatives to deal with paradoxes, and act according to institutional regulations. And this is how the process goes. The first step of the process is to identify a case that can be referred by the party. So what we do is that we have a type form where we receive inputs. For example, um, X person was being uh, rude to Y other person, and using some strong language. And that is the identification of the case. We first make a list of who are the people who is involved in the case, who are the main and secondary actors, and then we proceed to make caucuses or private meetings with the parties. So what we do in that second stage of screening the dispute is that we have we collect and gather the information from the multiple points of views of the parties to try to make an non-rivalrous screening of the dispute, a mapping of the dispute, where there are no judgments involved in the information, but rather the most objective way that we can present the information. And once we have that screening done, what we do is that then we invite the parties that participated in the gathering of the information to participate in the mediation and look for possible solutions. And then we have a post-mediation administration and party responsibilities, where we follow up on the agreement. And yeah, all this is a voluntary process. It normally can take between 1 month to 2 months, depending on the complexity of the case. But yeah, normally we do like two caucuses with the parties involved, and then we invite them to a meeting. But there can be multiple party conflicts where there are more than 6 people, and yeah, the complexity of the case grows then. But it's a really interesting process, and what really fuels for me is that sometimes when we end the process, people say, "Hey, what you did was really helpful for me. I felt heard. I felt that my needs were taken into account." And all this tries to make more comprehensive systems because when there is no people that can be like a witness or a facilitator in your conflict, it can happen that you can have like power imbalances or things that um, were not satisfactory for the people. But here we try to have like a very human-centered approach where we try to give like everyone the certainty that the rules apply to everyone, and it's not that if someone has more power or skin in the game, they can influence on the decision or what happens in a case. So basically, we as third party, what we do is we try to balance that relationship to a state where it can be healthy again and putting the both parties in the same place. So yeah, this is the process. Um, the step between the second and third part and the second and third step is when you have like we do a document where we map the key points of the dispute, and then we ask for the parties for their consent on that mapping, and then when we have consent from the parties on the mapping is when we invite them to the mediation. Because it's always important to build a safe space on these mediations where we are trying to find common ground. Sometimes people try to make like a mediation process, but without taking these two first steps. And what happens if you try to have a mediation without a proper preparation is that sparks uh, can come out of the mediation, and then the conflict can grow again. So what we try to do with this first and second step is to try to create a very, very, very safe space where we can take out all the possible things that can make the conflict scale again. So for creating that safe space, empathy is the key. For some of the things we do is that we separate the people from the problems because sometimes um, people when they are speaking about the problem they tend to individualize it or to point it out to other people, so they say like, hey, x or y people is the problem, but the problem is not the other person. The problem is a situation where both parties are involved. We try to use communication between parties. We generate a variety of alternative paths, and we use relatively neutral criteria to generate legitimacy and impartiality. So one of the first actions from the mediator when trying to help people in a conflict is trying to get them to their optimal arousal zone. Basically, this is a psychological concept that we all have three states of arousal, and we can be hyper aroused. And when we are hyper aroused, our instinctive reactions are to respond with flight or fight, and we can also have an hypoaroused state where we can freeze or fawn. But our first action from the mediator is to try to build confidence, to allow expression, to let him steam off, listen carefully, take notes, asking key questions, identify feelings, use careful language, try to not influence in any particular idea, just being there to understand the other and trying to bring them to their optimal arousal zone. Sometimes, and that is why it's so important to have a previous process before having a joint meeting of mediation. Because if you bring into a mediation two people who is maybe one who is hyper aroused and the other who is hypo aroused, you will still find that unbalance in the mediation, and you will see that their answers to the mediation will be based on their state of arousal. So basically, we try to do this work of bringing the people to a place where they can be able to talk and manage their emotions. But also, sometimes we see a lot of communication constraints, and this is something that we learned from nonviolent communication from Marshall Rosenberg. And it's that sometimes we talk with interpretation, with judgment, without connection, trying to have a strategy and demanding. But we try to also in those caucuses and in those private meetings and in that process of getting people to their optimal arousal zone, we try to traduce all of the feelings and the communication that they want to express with observation, feeling, needs, and requests that are things that favor and enrich the transformation of a conflict. Sometimes we want to transform a conflict, but we stay in the judgment phase. But instead, when we move to the MBC language, when facing a dispute, what we do is that we focus on how can we meet our needs, what and how can we enrich life, and what can we do uh, to understand and to put in place feelings that are something universal to all humans, and something that we all can experience and relate to. So for that, the four components of NBC are observation, feeling, needs, and request. And what we do also with the information that we take from the caucuses or private meetings is that we try to identify what are the feelings that are involved in the dispute, what are the needs that are at stake, and what are some of the requests that people think that can help them. We always try to encourage that the outcome comes from the parties because we think that they are the ones that really have the answers. So we always ask, like, okay, what would you think that would be the best possible outcome for you? Or what would you think that would be a key strategic transformational action that could have a high impact on you? For that, we also have this toolbox that is the Liberating Structures toolbox that is really interesting because if you don't know how to create a dynamic to try to gather some of this information, here you have a toolbox where you can find like, okay, maybe for this situation that I am living or for this conflict, maybe this tool is better than the other. And that this is something really cool because before my approach to mediation was like one tool fits for all, and I was always doing the same. But with this toolbox, I am doing something more creative, and and it's not like you are always having or doing the same, following the same processes. But if you identify that maybe one of these dynamics is better for the situation that you are having than other, then you have like somewhere, some place to go to, and to not always be like doing the same over and over again. So also we have a framework for conflict analysis that is what we call the four P's, that is people, problem, processes, and possible solutions. So basically, when we are mapping a case, what we do is that we identify who are the actors, what are the relationship of power, what are the interests, and this is the observation process. Then we, um, on the problem side, we write what is the context, what are the arguments, what are the aspirations, scale for each of the conflict, recognition, and willingness of the parties to address the conflict. Because if there is no willingness from the parties to address the conflict, there's very low possibility to have impact with a mediation in that case. So there's also some boundaries of mediation, and by recognizing the willingness of the parties to address the dispute is when we know if we have competence or not to continue doing the process. Then we have the third P, that is the process, that where we try to understand what were the triggering events, what are the ways of fighting, what has been the management given, how has been the communication, and the chronology of the conflict. So there we also try to relate to the needs, and then we see possible solutions, where we try to map alternative proposals. Uh, so not like one. Sometimes when we enter into a conflict, we get into that prisoner dilemma of of if you win, then I lose, and a zero-sum game. But with the mediation, we try to offer always like a third way, an alternative approach, and we try to create also blended approaches where it's not you win or I lose, but like we can produce um, a positive sum game from communication. Here are some of the main aspects of the four Ps. So if you want to map a conflict, just take this and write, okay, who are the main people, who are the main and secondary actors, what is the problem? Here you have like the definition, and you can just with these variables, you can easily map a situation. And recognition of the conflicting party. Here we also have some key factors from the process and the possible solutions. You also can use a comparative method. Like sometimes when we experience a conflict, if you look, you can see that the, there was other community that had a similar conflict, or you can see and there are some cases that were that have been already mapped or some conflicts that have been similar. So we use a lot the comparative method also to try to see um, how the process and possible solutions can come out. And basically, yeah, this is the mediation flow. I already explained that if the parties agree to mediate, we can continue. But if they don't agree to mediate, then the process stops. And when there's an agreement to settle, we continue with follow-up and post mediation responsibilities. But if there is no agreement, we also keep the registry that there was no agreement to state that we were not competent in that conflict, and also we are looking forward to be able to escalate the disputes that are managed by gravity to an arbitration process. So maybe if a mediation process where the third party doesn't have any authority on the outcome of the dispute, and that process doesn't work out, maybe we can facilitate an arbitration and try to find people where we can give the authority to take a decision. So that's in the case there's no agreement to mediate, then we will try to escalate. Here are some guiding questions if you want to mediate, and some like recommendations, like not talking about the past, not pointing out individual responsibilities, avoid focusing on names. It's not necessary to make all questions at once. When people start opening, catch the relevant information. Like guiding questions, how do we end something not desired and build something we do desire? Could you describe the conflicting situation that happened? What happened? Why do you think it happened? What would be the best possible outcome for you? What are you willing to compromise, negotiate in this process? What would be the worst scenario for you in this situation? How would you like to feel after what happened? What are your needs in this situation? What do you think that can be done to restore the relationship and build trust? What can we learn from this, and how can we apply this learning? Here we have some forms, and this is like sometimes people don't know how to make that first approach when they are facilitating a mediation. And this is like, oh, sorry, like, hello, how are you? My name is XXX, and I'm a facilitator of conflict management. Thank you for your input. I am reaching out with the intention of supporting meaningful communication processes. Would you be interested in having a meeting to talk on the issue? That's like a first approach that we can do as a conflict manager. And if the person says, okay, yeah, I want to meet, good. If they say, hey, I don't want to meet, or I am a little bit skeptical about the process, you can continue talking to break that initial ice and try to continue with the process. And here are some forms, like that's the observation form. I don't know if it opens, it doesn't open, but basically it's a form where you can take notes when you're having a private meeting. And this Venn diagram, this is something really beautiful that I would like to present, that it's a tool where we are trying to mix the Offner process of the nonviolent communication with the four P's of people, problem, process, solution in a Venn diagram. This is really beautiful. I would try to see if I can open this in the same dive, in the same, no, I can't. Okay, I will stop sharing and share the other slide. Yeah, so this is a tool that you can use to map a conflict. So here you write who is the people involved, what's the root of the problem, what's the process, what are some possible solutions. Here you write observation, feeling, needs, requests, and here you have the resistance. Here you have change, and here you have short-term actions that can be done and long-term strategical actions that can the short term are to like mitigate the immediate scaling of the case, and the long term are to strategically build things that prevent and build a better culture out of the conflict. And then you have here what is the strategy, what is the intention, how are you going to implement legitimacy, what will be some consequences, and what is the main purpose of this mediation. So all this is open source. So it's just Google Slides. If you want to map a conflict, use that tool. And I am finishing my slides. So um, this is how a mediation process goes. There's always a most desired outcome and a least acceptable agreement. And you have that from one party and one from the other party, and you will try to find what is the mutual motivation or the zone of possible agreement that is the common ground between uh, the desires and acceptable agreements from the parties. We keep the registry of all of our cases for transparency and our accountability. We have managed right now 24 conflicts. Um, it's been more than, I think Gravity has 2 years, so we have had like two conflicts per month, and we are still growing. We try to offer these processes and these services to DAOs. So the people who participates in any community that wants to have this, it's just to contact with us, and we will try to facilitate. We also do this as a way to be sustainable and to find, yeah, long-term sustainability for this project. Right now, the agreements that we have are on Google Docs, but we are also moving to Unbreakable Bows soon. That's a hackathon project that tries to have encrypted agreements. So with this, what we will have is that we can have a cryptographic signature of the agreement, and that way we can have more legitimacy on the outcomes of the mediations, because Google Docs sometimes like there's no binding anything with Google Docs, but here at least we can have the registry of a transaction in the blockchain. And this is what I was explaining before, that we have first a negotiation, and we offer some transformational actions. And if that doesn't work out, um, we will try to integrate and offer also the service of escalation to arbitration. Also. And that's the end of my presentation. With that, I am saying Onoponopono. That means thank you, I love you, forgive me, and I'm sorry.
Well, thank you so much, Juan. As an amazing presentation. Yeah, conflict is never easy, and having a little bit of help to help work through tough problems with key contributors is something that we have to do. And working with people from all over and different cultures and beliefs can sometimes cause friction. But coming together and meeting in that mutual ground between most desired outcome and least acceptable, is something that we have to learn to do. So thank you so much for facilitating DAOs and the tough work that goes in. I know 2 conflicts a month doesn't sound like a lot, but those are people and communities that really need that support. So thank you so much for helping out.
Thank you, thank you.